The man lived where the forest grew thick and quiet. No roads reached his cabin. No neighbors knocked on his door. People in the nearby village called him Edrin the lumberjack, but they only said his name in whispers. Not because he was cruel, but because he chose to live alone. Edrin woke before the sun every day. He cut wood. He fixed his roof. He hunted when he needed meat. The forest was his only company. Trees did not lie. Trees did not judge. Trees did not scream like people did in cities. Long ago, Edrin had lived among others. Long ago, he had trusted them. That trust was buried now, deep like roots under frozen soil. One evening, winter came early. Snow fell hard, thick and fast. Edrin walked toward the village for the first time in months. He needed salt and iron, nothing more. The village was loud. Fires burned. Voices argued. And then he heard something else. Chains. A wooden cage stood in the center of the square. Inside it, something small moved. The crowd laughed and spat words filled with hate. A goblin, someone said. Filthy thing. Cheap slave, almost broken. Edrin stopped walking. Goblins were rare here. Dangerous, people said. Thieves. Monsters. That was what stories taught children at night. The cage door opened. A trader pulled out a small figure. A dirty sack covered her head. Her hands were tied. Her body shook so badly she could barely stand. She's weak, the trader said. Good for nothing but simple work. I'll sell her cheap. Edrin felt something twist in his chest. He did not know why. He had seen animals treated better than this. He stepped forward. I'll take her, he said. The crowd went silent. The trader laughed. You live alone in the woods. She'd die out there. Edrin placed coins in the man's hand. Enough, more than enough. I said, I'll take her. The trader shrugged. Your problem now. The chains were removed. A rope replaced. Them. The sack stayed on her head. The goblin did not resist. She did not cry. She walked like someone already dead. Edrin turned and left the village. No one followed. No one cared. Snow fell harder as they walked. The goblin stumbled many times. Each time, Edrin slowed his steps. He did not pull the rope tight. He did not speak. By the time they reached the cabin, night had fallen. The cabin was small but strong. Smoke rose from the chimney. Warmth waited inside. Edrin closed the door behind them. The goblin froze. Her breathing became fast, sharp. Fear filled the room like smoke. Edrin noticed then how thin she was, how her clothes were torn, how blood stained her sleeve. He placed the axe against the wall, slowly, clearly, so she could see. He lit the fire. The goblin shook. Harder. Edrin took off his gloves. His hands were rough, scarred by years of work. He stood behind her. The sack still covered her head. This was the moment. He realized whatever he did next would decide everything. He had bought her as a worker, or so he told himself. But deep inside, he knew that was not the full truth. He had seen fear too many times in his life. He hated it. He reached for the knot of the sack. The goblin whimper. Edrin stopped. It's all right, he said softly. The words felt strange. He had not spoken gently to anyone in years. She did not answer. Maybe she did not understand. Slowly, carefully, he loosened the rope. The sack slid down. Edrin's breath caught in his throat. She was not what he expected. Her skin was green. Yes, but pale, sickly. Her ears were long but torn at the edges. One eye was swollen. The other stared at him, wide and shining with terror. She was young. Too young. Not a monster, a person. Tears ran down her face, silent and endless. She raised her hands to protect. Her head, waiting for pain. Edrin felt something break inside him. He stepped back. No, he said quietly. Not like that. He took a blanket from his bed and placed it gently around her shoulders. The goblin looked up, confused. He placed a bowl of soup on the table. Warm, steaming. Then he sat down across the room and waited. Minutes passed. Then, more. Slowly, trembling, the goblin reached for the bowl. Edrin watched the fire crackle. Outside, the forest listened. And somewhere deep within the trees, something ancient began to pay attention to the man who lived alone. Morning came slowly too. The forest. Light slipped through the cracks of the cabin roof and touched the wooden floor. The fire had turned to soft red embers. The smell of soup still hung in the air. Edrin was already awake. He sat on a stool, sharpening his axe, but his eyes were not on the blade. They were on the corner of the room. The goblin was still there. She sat curled near the wall, wrapped tightly in the blanket. She had not tried to run. She had not slept much either. Her eyes followed every small movement Edrin made. Fear lived inside her. Deep. Old Edrin set the axe down slowly and stood. She flinched at once. He raised both hands empty. "I won't hurt you," he said. His voice was calm, but she did not relax. Words meant little to someone who had only known pain. He turned away from her and placed bread on the table, fresh, soft. Then he stepped back again. The goblin stared at the food like it might bite her. Minutes passed. Finally, hunger won. She moved. Slowly, each step careful, ready to jump back. She took the bread with shaking fingers and ate like someone who had not eaten properly in days. Crumbs fell onto the floor. Tears fell with them. Edrin said nothing. After she finished, she whispered something in her own language. Her voice was weak, broken. Edrin did not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. Thanks. He nodded once. Outside, the wind pushed snow against the walls. Winter was tightening its grip. Edrin pointed to a chair. "You can sit," he said. She looked at the chair, then at him, confused. Slowly, she sat. Her eyes never left his face. Edrin took a deep breath. "My name is Edrin," he pointed to himself. "Edrin." She blinked. Then she touched her chest with one finger. Her voice was barely louder than the fire. "Lyra." Edrin repeated it. "Lyra," at the sound of her name from a human mouth. Her eyes widened. She had not expected that. Silence filled the cabin again, but it was different now. Less sharp. Edrin noticed her wounds more clearly in the daylight. Bruises on her arms. Old scars on her wrists where chains had been. One cut on her leg that was badly healed. He took out a small cloth and a jar of salve. When he stepped closer, Lyra panicked. She backed against the wall, breathing fast, hands raised. "No," she whispered. "Please, no." The word was broken, but clear. Edrin stopped at once. He knelt and placed the jar on the floor, then pushed it toward her with two fingers. "For you," he said. He moved back. Lyra stared at the jar for a long time. Slowly, she reached out and touched it. When nothing happened, she opened it. The smell of herbs filled the air. Understanding flickered in her eyes. She treated her wounds herself. That was the moment something changed. Later, Edrin gave her old clothes. Too big but warm. He showed her the door, the table, the fire. Simple things. Safe things. She watched carefully. Learned quickly. As the day passed, she grew less tense. Not calm, but no longer shaking. At sunset, she finally spoke again. "Why?" she asked. The word was simple, heavy. Edrin looked at the fire. "Because you were afraid," he said. Lyra frowned. "Humans like fear." That surprised him. "Who told you that?" "All," she said softly. "All goblins know." She told him then, in broken words and signs. Goblins were taught humans were monsters. Humans burned forests. Humans broke clans. Humans took goblins as slaves and laughed as they cried. Edrin listened in silence. When she finished, she waited. Waiting for anger. Waiting for punishment. Instead, Edrin stood and opened the door. Cold air rushed in. He pointed outside, then to the forest. If I wanted you dead, he said, you would already be gone. Lyra followed his gaze. Endless trees. Endless dark. He closed the door again and locked it from the inside. But you are here, he continued, and you will stay warm. Her lips trembled. Something inside her cracked. That night, Lyra slept. Near the fire. For the first time in years, she slept without chains. Edrin lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. He told himself he had done nothing special. But outside, between the trees, fresh footprints appeared in the snow. Small, careful, watching. The scream woke Edrin. It was sharp, thin, and full of terror. He was on his feet in an instant, axe in his hands. Firelight shook across the walls as he rushed into the main room. Lyra was pressed against the door, shaking. They are here, she whispered. Edrin listened. At first, he heard only the wind. Then, a sound that did not belong to the storm. Soft steps. Careful, too careful. Something moved outside the cabin. Edrin motioned for Lyra to step back. He placed himself between her and the door. The handle turned. Once, then stopped. Silence. Returned, heavy and waiting. Edrin did not open the door. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, the pressure faded. The steps moved away, swallowed by the snow. Lyra slid down the wall, breathing hard. Hunters, she said. They never stop. Edrin locked the door again, adding a thick wooden bar. His jaw tightened. He had known. This would come. He knelt in front of Lyra, keeping his voice low. Who are they? She hesitated, then spoke. They take goblins. Sell them, break them. Her fingers clenched. If one escapes. They hunt. Edrin looked at the walls of his cabin. Thin wood. Old iron. Not enough. The forest had kept him safe for years. Now it was being tested. He gave Lyra a cup of warm water. She drank slowly, hands shaking. They think you own me, she said. Edrin shook his head. I don't own people. Lyra stared at him, confused. Then, what am I? The question hit him harder than any axe swing. You are. Here, he said at last. Because you choose to be. She looked away, fighting tears. That night, Edrin did not sleep. He watched the windows. Listened to every sound. His grip on the axe never loosened. Near dawn, the forest changed. The wind stopped. The snow stopped. The silence became too deep. Edrin felt it in his bones. The same feeling he had felt only once before, long ago. When he had strayed too far into the old woods, something was awake. Outside, the trees creaked, not from wind, but from weight. Shadows moved where none should move. Lyra gasped. The forest. Mothers, she whispered. Edrin frowned. What? Old spirits, she said. They watch. They judge. A low hum filled the air, like the forest breathing. Edrin stepped outside. The cold cut into him at once, but he stood firm. Snow reached his boots. The trees leaned inward, their branches forming a dark arch around the cabin. I don't know what you want, Edrin said into the silence. But she stays. The hum grew louder. A shape formed between the trees. Not solid. Not empty. A voice echoed, not in his ears, but in his chest. Why do you protect what is not your kind? Edrin did not hesitate. Because she was afraid, he said. The forest stilled. Fear is weakness. No, Edrin replied. It's pain. Silence stretched. Then the presence shifted. The pressure lifted slightly. Lyra stepped beside him, trembling but brave. He speaks truth, she said. I felt it. The trees slowly pulled back. The hum faded. The forest went quiet again. When Edrin returned inside, his legs finally shook. Lyra looked at him with something new in her eyes. Not fear, not confusion. Hope. But beyond the edge of the forest, far from the cabin's light, a man watched from behind a tree. He smiled. Found you, the hunter whispered. Snow fell again, slow and heavy. As if the sky itself was thinking, Edrin stood outside the cabin, staring at the tree line. The forest was calm now, too calm. What had spoken in the night was gone, but its words stayed with him. Why do you protect what is not your kind? Behind him, the door opened softly. Lyra stepped out, wrapped in her blanket. She moved quietly, like someone afraid to wake the world. "They will come again," she said. Edrin nodded. "I know." They stood together, human and goblin, facing the same danger. Inside the cabin, Edrin spread old papers across the table, maps, trade slips. Notes taken long ago when he still dealt with people. Lyra watched as he read, his brow tight. "The traitors lied," Edrin said at last. "There is no legal goblin slavery here. None." Lyra's breath caught. "Then, I was stolen?" "Yes," the word hit hard. Her knees gave way, and she sat heavily on the chair. Her hands clenched in the blanket. "All that pain," she whispered. "For nothing." Edrin felt anger rise, slow and heavy. Not wild rage, but something colder. "They will try to take you back," he said. "If they do, they won't sell." "You again." Lyra looked up sharply. "They will kill me." Edrin met her eyes. "Not while I'm breathing." The words surprised them both. Silence filled the cabin. Edrin turned away, opening a chest near his bed. Inside were things he had not touched in years. A better axe. A short blade. Old armor, scratched and worn. Lyra watched him, fear mixing with awe. "You will fight them?" she asked. "If I must." She stood. Slowly, she bowed her head. "Not in fear but respect. No human has ever done this for us," she said. "Never." Edrin tightened the straps of the armor. "Then maybe it's time one did." That night, he showed her the forest paths. Hidden trails. Places to hide if things went wrong. But Lyra did not run. Instead, she stopped near an old oak tree. She placed her hand on its bark and closed her eyes. The air shifted. Edrin felt it again, that deep, quiet power. "This place knows me," Lyra said. "My bloodline is old. The forest listens." Edrin stared at her. "You never said this before." "I was afraid," she replied. "Power makes fear worse." A low whisper passed through the leaves. The forest accepted her words. Back at the cabin, Edrin made a decision. If the hunters came, he would not hide. He would not run, that he would stand. At dawn, they came. 3 men stepped into the clearing, armed. Smiling, the leader raised his hand. "Nice place you have. We're just here for our property." Edrin stepped forward, axe resting on his shoulder. "She's not yours," he said. The man laughed. "Everything has a price." Edrin shook his head. "Not this." The forest grew silent. The men felt it too. Their smiles faded. Behind Edrin, Lyra stood tall. "No sack, no chains." The leader's eyes widened. "That goblin. She's marked." Too late. Roots cracked through the snow. Branches bent. The forest chose his side. Edrin realized something as he raised his axe. This was no longer about saving a goblin. This was about what it meant to be human. The first hunter screamed. It happened so fast that even Edrin did not see the strike clearly. A root burst from the ground, thick and alive, wrapping around the man's leg and slamming him into the snow. The other 2 stumbled back in shock. "This forest!" One of them shouted. Edrin did not wait. He moved like the trees taught him, slow, steady, unstoppable. His axe swung once, not wild, not angry. The blade struck the hunter's weapon and sent it flying. Steel hit snow. The man froze. Humans were supposed to be weak out here. Alone. Afraid. At there. Ian was none of those things. Lyra stood behind him, her hands raised, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The forest answered her presence with low creaks and shifting branches. "Leave," Edrin said. The leader laughed, though fear leaked into his voice. "You think roots will save you? We've killed worse." He reached for a knife. Edrin stepped forward. The ground cracked again. Another root wrapped around the leader's arm, crushing the knife from his grip. He screamed as he was dragged to his knees. Edrin stopped inches from him. "Look at her," Edrin said. The man spat. "It's just a goblin." Edrin's voice hardened. "Say that again." The forest leaned closer. The man swallowed. He could feel it now, the pressure, the watching. "She's alive," he muttered. Edrin nodded once. The third hunter ran. He did not get far. Branches dropped in his path, forcing him back. The forest did not strike him, but it guided him away. When the roots released the others, they crawled backward through the snow, terror written across their faces. "This land is cursed," the leader gasped. "No," Edrin said. "It's guarded." They fled. Silence returned slowly. Snow began to fall again, soft and gentle, like the world forgiving itself. The Drin lowered his axe. Only then did his hand start to shake. Lyra stepped forward. She looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. "You did not kill them," she sighed. "I didn't need to," Edrin replied. She placed a hand over her chest. "Among goblins, strength is power. Among humans, what is this?" Edrin thought for a moment. "Choice," he said. That night, the forest burned with soft lights, small glowing motes floating between the trees. Old spirits whispered approval. Lyra sat beside the fire, her posture straighter now. Fear no longer ruled her movements. "Where will you go?" Edrin asked. She looked at him. "I was going to ask you the same." The question hung between them. Before Edrin could answer, Lyra spoke again, quieter. "My people will come," she said. "When they learn I live." Edrin nodded. "Then we'll face that too." She smiled, a real smile this time. Beyond the forest, far from the cabin, word began to spread. A human had stood against hunters. A human had not bowed. And the world was starting to listen. The goblins arrived at dawn. They did not come screaming or charging. They came like shadows between trees, silent and careful. Edrin sensed them before he saw them. The forest shifted, not in warning, but in greeting. Lyra stood straight beside him. "They are my clan," she said. "They will not attack unless I am harmed." Edrin kept his axe low, not raised. From the tree stepped 5 goblins, taller and stronger than Lyra. Their armor was carved from bark and bone. Old symbols glowed faintly on their skin. The one in front bowed to Lyra. "You live," the goblin said. "And you stand free." "I do," Lyra answered. "Because of him." All eyes turned to Edrin. The forest went quiet. The leader studied him for a long moment. "You are human." "Humans do not protect goblins." Edrin met his gaze. "Some do." A murmur passed through the group. The leader raised a hand and the ground beneath the cabin warmed. The cold eased. "The forest remembers you," the goblin said. "It speaks of your choice." Edrin frowned. "I didn't do it for the forest." "That," the goblin replied, "is why it listens." Lyra stepped forward. "I will return with you. My people must hear the truth." Edrin's chest tightened, though he said nothing. The leader nodded. "You are welcome among us, human. Name your reward." Edrin looked at Lyra, then at the trees. He had lived among for so long. "I want nothing," he said. "Just let her choose her path." The goblins exchanged looks. "She already has," Lyra said softly. She turned to Edrin. "I will go. But not forever." The leader touched the ground with his staff. Roots wrapped briefly around Edrin's boots, warm and gentle. "Then this land is bound to you," the goblin said. "No hunter will cross it again." Lyra reached out and took Edrin's hand. For a moment, the forest held its breath. "I thought humans were monsters," she said. "Now I know better." Edrin squeezed her hand once and let go. The goblins vanished back into the trees. The cabin felt empty. But not lonely. As the sun rose higher, Edrin returned to his work. He lifted his axe and struck the first tree of the day. The forest did not resist. It accepted him. And far beyond the woods, new stories were already growing. Stories about a human who did not kneel. Years passed, but the forest never forgot. Snow came and went. Trees fell and grew again. The cabin still stood, strong and quiet, just as it always had. Edrin remained there, living his simple life, cutting wood, listening to the wind. But the silence was different now. Travelers began to stop at the edge of the woods. Goblins, humans, even others who once feared both. None entered without permission. All had heard the same story. A human lived here, a human who did not enslave, a human who chose. One spring morning, Lyra returned. She walked into the clearing without fear, her steps light, her back straight. She wore no chains, no sack. Marks of leadership shone faintly on her skin. Edrin looked up from his work and smiled. "You came back," he said. "I promised," she replied. She told him what had changed. Goblin clans no longer believed all human lies or all goblin ones. Either slavers were hunted. Forest borders were respected. All because of one choice, she said. Edrin shook his head. Because of many choices. They sat by the fire as old friends, not master and servant, not human and goblin, just two people who had stood when it mattered. When Lyra rose to leave again, she placed a small wooden token in his hand, carved with tree roots and a human figure. A reminder, she said, that monsters are made by stories and broken by truth. After she left, Edrin returned to the forest, and when he finally grew old and laid down his axe for the last time, the forest itself marked his passing. Trees bent. Roots wrapped his cabin in protection. They did not call him a hero. They called him human, not because of his strength, but because he chose to be.